The first bullet shattered the bakery window, 3 inches from Clara Bennett's face. Glass exploded across the darkened shop, raining over trays of cooling bread and scattering silver fragments across the black and white floor. Clara dropped behind the counter, one hand covering her head, while the other still gripped the paper bag she had been preparing for the homeless man who slept beneath the train bridge. For one suspended second, the bakery went silent. Then the front door opened. Not violently, not hurriedly. A tall man in a black overcoat stepped through the broken entrance, as though the gunfire had been nothing more than rain. He moved with terrifying calm. Water glistened on his shoulders. His dark hair was damp, his expression unreadable, and his eyes swept across the ruined bakery with the cold precision of someone accustomed to walking into rooms where people died. 2 more shots struck the brick outside. The stranger crossed the floor, crouched behind the counter, and pressed Clara against the cabinets before she could protest. "Stay down." His voice was low, controlled, and strangely familiar. Clara's breath caught as he leaned over her, shielding her with his body. Beneath the clean scent of rain and expensive cologne, she detected smoke and metal. His jaw was tense, but his hand at the back of her neck was careful, almost protective. Outside, tires screamed. Black SUVs flooded the narrow Chicago street, blocking both intersections. Men in dark coats emerged beneath the cold rain, their movements disciplined and silent. Clara stared through the shattered display case. "What is happening?" The stranger did not answer. A man entered through the kitchen carrying a weapon. Before Clara could scream, the stranger turned, caught the attacker's wrist, and drove him into the wall with brutal efficiency. The struggle lasted only seconds. A tray crashed. Metal clattered across the tile. Then the attacker was on the floor, unconscious. The stranger adjusted his cuff as though nothing had happened. Clara stared at him, trembling. He turned toward her, and for the first time, the expression in his eyes changed. Not softness, recognition. It was deeper and more dangerous than that. He looked at her as if he had spent years imagining this exact moment and hated that it had finally arrived. "Clara Bennett," he said quietly. Her stomach tightened. She had never told him her name. "Who are you?" His gaze lowered to the paper bag she still held. The top had torn open, revealing 2 slices of bread, an apple, and a small container of soup. Something shifted in his face. A memory. A wound. Before he could speak, one of the men from outside entered. "Mr. Vale, the street is secured." Clara stopped breathing. Everyone in Chicago knew the name Adrian Vale. They spoke it in courtrooms, city offices, luxury clubs, and police stations, but rarely above a whisper. He owned shipping companies, hotels, security firms, and half the warehouses along the river. Newspapers called him a private investor. Federal investigators called him untouchable. The neighborhoods called him what he truly was, the most feared mafia boss in America. Clara looked at the man crouched beside her. Rainwater slid from his coat onto the flour-dusted floor. "You're Adrian Vale." His eyes remained fixed on hers. "Yes." Another man approached the broken doorway. "We need to move. Moretti's people may return." Adrian rose, but Clara caught his sleeve. "Why were they shooting at my bakery?" He looked at her hand around his arm. The contact seemed to affect him more than the bullets had. Then his expression hardened. "Because I came here." She released him immediately. "You brought this to my door?" A muscle moved in his jaw. "I came because it was already at your door." The men outside spread through the street, checking rooftops and alleyways. Neighbors watched from dark windows as expensive vehicles idled in the rain. Clara stood slowly. Her knees shook, but she refused to let him see it. "I don't understand." "You don't need to understand tonight. You walk into my bakery, people start shooting, and now you're telling me what I need to understand." His gaze sharpened with what might have been surprise. Men twice Clara's size probably lowered their eyes when Adrian Vale spoke. Clara only tightened her grip on the ruined counter. He stepped closer. "You're coming with me." "No." The single word silenced the room. One of Adrian's men looked away, perhaps to hide his reaction. Adrian studied her with cold patience. "The men who attacked this building know your name, your address, and where you work. And whose fault is that?" "Mine." The admission was so immediate that it unsettled her. He did not justify himself. He did not threaten her. He simply stood amid the broken glass and accepted the accusation. Clara looked toward the apartment building across the street. The narrow red brick structure had belonged to her mother. 4 families still lived there, including Mrs. Alvarez on the first floor and the Patterson twins upstairs. "I'm not leaving everyone here. They've already been moved." Clara's eyes snapped back to him. "Moved where?" "To safe locations. You had my neighbors taken from their homes. I had them protected. Without asking me?" I didn't have time to ask. The rain intensified outside. Blue and red lights flashed at the far end of the street but did not approach. Even the police seemed unwilling to cross the invisible line created by Adrian's vehicles. Clara's anger pushed through her fear. "You don't get to take control of my life because someone fired a gun." His voice dropped. "They didn't fire at the building, Clara. They fired at you." She went still. Adrian reached inside his coat slowly and removed a photograph. It showed Clara leaving the bakery 3 nights earlier, carrying groceries beneath a yellow umbrella. A red circle had been drawn around her face. On the back, someone had written, "The debt comes due." Clara stared at the words. "What debt?" Adrian's fingers closed around the photograph. "The one I should have paid 15 years ago." Before she could ask what he meant, an explosion flashed at the end of the alley. Adrian moved instantly, wrapping one arm around her waist and pulling her against him. His men rushed forward. Smoke rolled above the neighboring roofs. Clara's heart hammered against his chest. His mouth was close to her ear when he spoke. "You can hate me from somewhere secure." Then he lifted her into his arms and carried her through the rain. The black SUVs formed a wall around them. Neighbors watched from behind curtains as America's most feared criminal held Clara as though she were the only fragile thing left in the city. She should have fought him. Instead, she stared at his face while rain streaked across his skin and wondered why the coldest man in Chicago looked terrified of losing her. The convoy drove north along the lake, leaving the old neighborhood behind. Clara sat in the rear of the armored SUV beside Adrian, wrapped in a wool blanket she had not asked for. A privacy partition separated them from the driver. Beyond the tinted windows, Chicago dissolved into ribbons of neon and rain. Adrian had not spoken for 11 minutes. Clara knew because she had counted every one of them. He sat with one hand resting near his knee, his posture controlled, his face turned toward the window. A faint scar crossed his right eyebrow. Another disappeared beneath his collar. He did not look like the teenage boys Clara remembered from the neighborhood. He looked carved from every hard decision he had ever made. She watched him until he turned. "What? You said something about 15 years ago." His expression revealed nothing. "I did. And this isn't the place to discuss it. You seem to decide where I go, where my neighbors sleep, and when I'm allowed to understand why people are trying to kill me." His chaza held hers. "I decide what keeps you alive. That isn't an answer. It's the only one you're getting until we reach the house." Clara folded her arms. "I'm not staying in your house. You are tonight. You're very accustomed to getting your way." "Yes." The bluntness almost made her laugh, but there was nothing amusing in his eyes. She glanced down at her flour-stained clothes. "What happened to the man in the bakery? He'll be questioned. By the police?" "No." The quiet certainty in his response chilled her. Clara turned toward the window. "You hurt people, when necessary. And who decides when it's necessary?" "I do." She looked back at him. "That should frighten you." For the first time, Adrian's composure shifted. Not much, just a faint narrowing of his eyes. "Most people don't speak to me that way. Most people probably want something from you. And you don't? I want my life back." His gaze traveled over her face, lingering as though he were memorizing changes she could not understand. "You were losing it long before I walked into that bakery." Clara's throat tightened. "You know about the building. I know the bank intends to seize it in 11 days. I know the bakery has missed 3 commercial rent payments. I know your mother's medical debt was transferred to a private collection agency 6 months after her death. I know you sold her jewelry to keep the heat running last winter." Each sentence struck like an invasion. Clara stared at him in disbelief. "How do you know that?" Adrian looked toward the rain-covered window again. "I know everything that threatens you. That isn't protection. That's surveillance." He said nothing. A terrible thought formed. "How long have you been watching me?" The city lights moved across his face. "Long enough." Her anger returned, sharper than fear. "You had no right." "No." Again, no excuse. Clara waited for him to defend himself, but he did not. The silence became intimate in a way she resented. She could feel his restraint filling the vehicle. every unspoken truth pressing between them. "Who is Vincent Moretti?" she asked. Adrian's eyes darkened. "The man behind tonight's attack. Why does he care about me?" "Because he believes you matter to me." "Do I?" The question left her before she could stop it. Adrian's gaze locked onto hers. The air inside the SUV changed. His hand shifted once, almost rising from his knee as though he intended to touch her. Then his fingers curled into a fist. "You matter enough for him to start a war." Clara's heartbeat stumbled. "That isn't what I asked." "No," he said, "it isn't." The SUV turned through iron gates and entered an estate overlooking Lake Michigan. The mansion seemed built for someone who trusted walls more than people. Pale stone rose behind rows of dark trees. Security lights swept across the grounds. Cameras turned silently above the entrance, while armed guards stood beneath the portico. Clara stepped from the vehicle and stared upward. "You live here alone?" Adrian came around the SUV. "Usually." "That sounds miserable." A bodyguard coughed and quickly looked down. Adrian studied Clara as though no one had ever criticized his mansion before. "It's secure." "That wasn't my point." Inside, the house was warmer than she expected. Soft amber light illuminated marble floors, dark wood, and a sweeping staircase. Everything was elegant, expensive, and emotionally empty. A woman in her 60s approached. "Miss Bennett, I'm Evelyn. I manage the residence. We've prepared a room for you." Clara glanced at Adrian. "Prepared when?" "3 hours ago," Evelyn answered. 3 hours. Before the bakery attack. Clara turned slowly toward him. "You knew something would happen." "I knew Moretti had found the neighborhood." "And you still came to the bakery?" "I came to get you before his men did." "By walking through the front door and leading them straight to me?" His expression hardened. "I underestimated how quickly they would move." Clara stepped closer, lowering her voice. "Men like you always call it an error when other people bleed." Adrian's face became still. For a moment, the guards around them seemed to stop breathing. Then he dismissed everyone with a glance. When the foyer emptied, he faced her. "You're right." The admission surprised her again. "I've spent 15 years making certain no one could reach me," he continued. "I failed to consider what would happen when they realized I could be reached through someone else." Clara's anger faltered. "Why me?" Adrian looked beyond her toward the tall windows, where rain moved down the glass like tears. "Tomorrow." "No, tonight." His gaze returned to hers. Something old and wounded passed through his eyes. "Tonight? You need sleep." "I won't sleep without the truth." He stepped close enough that she could see a tiny pale line beneath his lower lip. His voice dropped. 15 years ago, there was a boy who slept in the abandoned laundry room beside your mother's building." Clara forgot the guards, the mansion, and the rain. A memory opened inside her. Winter. A broken radiator. A thin boy sitting behind the basement stairs with blood on his knuckles and hunger hollowing his face. He had called himself Eli. She had been 16, awkward and heavier than the girls at school, always hiding behind oversized sweaters. That night, after hearing a noise in the basement, she had found him trying to steal canned food from a storage shelf. He had looked ready to run. Instead of calling the police, Clara had sat beside him and divided her dinner in half. It had been the last meal in her home until her mother's paycheck arrived. Tomato soup, 2 pieces of bread, 1 bruised apple. Clara stared at Adrian. "No." His eyes did not leave hers. "You gave him your coat when the temperature dropped below freezing." "No." "You told him that being hungry didn't make him worthless." Her lips parted. The scar near his eyebrow. The controlled way he watched doors. The familiar rhythm beneath his voice. "Eli?" Adrian's expression finally broke. Not completely, but enough for Clara to see the homeless boy beneath the Mafia Boss. "My name was never Eli," he said. "But it was the only name I trusted you with." Clara stepped back. The past and present collided so violently that she felt dizzy. "You disappeared." "I had to. I looked for you." His jaw tightened. "I know." Her eyes filled. "How could you know?" "Because I came back." "When?" 6 months later. Clara searched his face. "You never came to the apartment. I stood across the street. Why didn't you speak to me?" "Because by then I had blood on my hands." Silence spread through the enormous foyer. Adrian's gaze dropped briefly, as if the next words cost him something. "The night I left, I found the men who had killed my father. One of them worked for Vincent Moretti. I tried to steal from him. Instead of killing me, Moretti saw something useful. You joined him. I survived him. That isn't the same thing. No, Adrian said quietly. It isn't. Clara wiped a tear before it could fall. All these years, I knew where you lived, where you worked. When your mother became ill, when the building began failing, you watched me lose everything. His face tightened. I paid the hospital anonymously. Clara froze. What? Your mother's final surgery. The experimental treatment afterward. The physician from New York. Clara remembered the miraculous foundation grant that had arrived after every appeal had been denied. Her stomach turned. That was you? Yes. She died anyway. I know. There was grief in his voice. Real grief. Carefully buried. Clara looked around the mansion. And the bakery? The landlord stopped increasing your rent because I purchased the property through another company. The heating repairs in the building. Mine. The scholarship for Mrs. Alvarez's grandson. Adrian said nothing. Clara stared at him. You rebuilt pieces of my life without ever speaking to me. I tried. No. You moved money around. You watched from a distance. You made decisions for me without letting me know they were yours. I was keeping you away from my world. And now your world is shooting through my windows. His expression went cold again, but she understood now that the coldness was armor. Yes. Clara's tears came despite her effort to stop them. You remembered a bowl of soup for 15 years? Adrian took one careful step toward her. You gave away your last meal. We were children. You were hungry too. She remembered telling him she had already eaten. She had lied. Adrian knew. You sat beside me, he said. No one had sat beside me for months. People looked through me, stepped around me, or chased me away. You looked at me like I was still human. His hand lifted. For one breathless moment, Clara thought he would touch her face. He stopped inches away. Then he lowered it. I built everything after that night around one promise. What promise? That no one would ever make me helpless again. His voice became almost inaudible. And that someday I would return what you gave me. Clara looked into the eyes of the most dangerous man in America and saw the starving boy who had never understood that kindness was not a debt. You can't repay compassion by owning someone's life. I don't own you. You had me followed. To protect you. You bought buildings around me. To keep you safe. You moved my neighbors. To keep them alive. His control finally cracked. The words echoed through the foyer. Adrian looked away, breathing once through his nose as though reclaiming command over himself. Clara watched him. This was not gratitude. Not anymore. It had grown in darkness for 15 years, becoming something possessive, disciplined, and dangerous. Eli, she whispered. His eyes closed briefly at the old name. No one calls me that. I do. When he opened his eyes, the Mafia Boss was still there, but something beneath him had been exposed. You should sleep, he said. And tomorrow? Tomorrow, I show you why Moretti believes you can destroy me. Clara's bedroom overlooked the lake, but she barely noticed the view. She spent the night walking from the window to the fireplace, trying to reconcile the half-starved boy in the laundry room with the man whose name could empty restaurants and frighten judges. Shortly before dawn, she heard voices in the corridor. Adrian stood in his study with 3 men, speaking beside a wall of illuminated maps. Clara remained outside the partially open door. Moretti has moved people into the West Harbor district, one man said. He's telling the family's Vale has become emotionally compromised. Another voice followed. He wants the council meeting moved to the Meridian Casino. And the attacker? Adrian asked. Wouldn't speak. Everyone speaks eventually. Clara's stomach tightened. A chair moved. Then Adrian said, no one approaches Bennett Street without my authorization. Double the protection around every resident. Moretti will interpret that as weakness. He can interpret it from a grave. The room went silent. Clara stepped away from the door, but the floor creaked. Adrian appeared before she reached the staircase. He wore a black shirt with the sleeves rolled to his forearms. No jacket, no tie. Somehow the lack of armor made him more dangerous. How long were you listening? Long enough. His gaze moved over her face. You should be asleep. You keep saying that as if sleep is possible in a house full of armed men. They're here to protect you. They're here because of you. Yes. Clara descended 2 steps, bringing them nearly eye level. What does emotionally compromised mean? Adrian's mouth hardened. It means Moretti is trying to convince my allies that my judgment can no longer be trusted. Because of me? Because he thinks I'll sacrifice strategic interests to keep you alive. Would you? The question hung between them. Adrian moved closer to the staircase. I burned 3 alliances last night. Clara's fingers tightened around the railing. To protect me? To make sure the men responsible had nowhere to hide. That isn't an answer. His eyes held hers. Yes. The word moved through her like heat. Adrian reached the bottom step but did not touch her. Moretti raised me after my father died, he said. He taught me how power works. He also taught me that affection is leverage. For years he searched for mine. And found me. He found the payments connected to your mother's care. Why didn't you erase them? I did. Then how did he find them? Adrian's expression darkened. Someone close to me betrayed me. The betrayal revealed itself before breakfast. Marcus Reed, Adrian's chief financial officer and closest advisor, entered the mansion under guard. He was elegant, silver-haired, and calm even with blood darkening one sleeve. Adrian waited in the library. Clara stood near the fireplace despite his order to remain upstairs. Marcus glanced at her and smiled faintly. So this is the girl with the soup. Adrian struck him once. The movement was so fast Clara barely saw it. Marcus fell against a table, sending a crystal decanter crashing to the floor. You don't speak to her, Adrian said. Marcus wiped blood from his mouth. There it is, the great Adrian Vale finally showing us what he worships. Clara's pulse raced. Adrian's men stood along the walls, but none intervened. You sold her name to Moretti, Adrian said. I sold him a theory. You proved it correct. You sent armed men to her workplace. I told myself Moretti only wanted leverage. Adrian's voice became quieter. You knew better. Marcus looked toward Clara again. He's watched you for 15 years. Did he tell you that? Not security reports. Photographs. Recordings. Every birthday. Every job. Every man who took you to dinner and failed to call afterward. Clara felt the room tilt. Adrian's face became lethal. Enough. He owns a room filled with your life. Adrian seized Marcus by the collar. Clara stepped forward. Stop. He froze. Not because Marcus mattered. Because she had spoken. Clara looked at Adrian. Is it true? His grip remained tight. Clara, is there a room? Silence answered first. Then Adrian released Marcus. Yes. The word hollowed something inside her. Show me. This isn't the time. Show me now. Marcus laughed softly. Adrian turned his head, and the laughter ended. Minutes later, Clara followed him beneath the mansion. They passed through a secured elevator and entered an underground level hidden behind steel doors. The corridor smelled faintly of concrete and cold air. Adrian stopped before a locked room. You may misunderstand what you see. Then explain it. He placed his palm against a scanner. The door opened. Clara stepped inside and forgot how to breathe. Photographs covered the walls. Not hundreds. Thousands. Clara at 18, laughing with her mother outside the apartment building. Clara at 21, carrying textbooks through snow. Clara, sitting alone in a hospital corridor. Clara, asleep beside her mother's bed. Clara leaving the cemetery beneath a black umbrella. Clara baking bread at 4 in the morning. Clara standing on a ladder, repainting Mrs. Alvarez's ceiling. Clara crying in her car after receiving the foreclosure notice. There were maps, financial documents, medical reports, newspaper clippings, and surveillance schedules. One wall displayed every known threat near Bennett Street. In the center of the room stood a glass case. Inside lay a faded blue scarf. Clara recognized it instantly. She had wrapped it around Eli's neck the last night she saw him. Her eyes filled with tears, but anger reached her first. This is not protection. Adrian stood in the doorway, his face unreadable. No. This is obsession. Yes. The honesty was more frightening than denial. Clara turned toward him. You watched me grieve. You watched me struggle. You knew when I was going to lose the building, and instead of knocking on my door, you hid down here and collected photographs. Every time I considered approaching you, someone near me died. So you decided to turn my life into a private museum? His jaw tightened. I needed to know you were safe. You needed to control the one memory of yourself that wasn't violent. The words struck him. Clara saw it. Adrian entered the room slowly. You think this is about preserving innocence? I think you turned me into something I never agreed to be. You were never a symbol to me. What was I? His eyes moved across her face. The only person I trusted before I understood trust was dangerous. Clara's anger weakened beneath the pain in his voice. But she refused to let it disappear. "You didn't trust me enough to return." "I trusted you," he said. "I didn't trust myself near you." He stopped, several feet away. "At first, I told myself I was repaying a debt. Then your mother became ill, and I couldn't stay away. After she died, you sat on the steps of the building until morning. I watched from a car across the street." Clara remembered that night. The cold stone beneath her. The unbearable silence of returning to an empty apartment. "You should have come to me." "I almost did." "Why didn't you?" "Because a man had been killed in front of me 2 hours earlier. His blood was still on my cuff." His voice remained calm, but his eyes did not. "I looked at you and understood that if I crossed the street, I would eventually bring death to your door. You brought it anyway." "Yes." Adrian looked toward the photographs. "That is my failure." Clara stepped closer to the glass case. "Why keep the scarf?" "It was the first thing anyone gave me without expecting something in return." She stared at the faded fabric. Behind her, Adrian said, "I know this room is wrong." She turned. "Then why does it exist?" "Because knowing where you were became the only way I slept." The confession stripped away the luxury, power, and terrifying reputation. For one moment, he looked emotionally exhausted. Clara hated that part of her understood him. She hated even more that part of her wanted to step toward him. Instead, she said, "You need to let me leave." Adrian became still. "The threat remains active. I'm not asking. You can't return home. Then send me somewhere that isn't yours." "No." The word was immediate. Clara's eyes narrowed. "You said you don't own me." "I don't." "Then open the gate." Adrian moved closer. "Moretti will take you within an hour. That is a risk I'm willing to make." "I'm not." Their faces were inches apart. Clara could feel the heat of him, the restraint in every controlled breath. His gaze dropped briefly to her mouth and then returned to her eyes. "You don't get to make that decision," she whispered. "I know." "Then why are you doing it?" His expression darkened with something beyond possession. "Because I survived hunger, beatings, prisons, and every man who tried to bury me. I built an empire while people begged for mercy at my feet. None of it frightened me." His hand rose toward her face. Again, he stopped before touching her. "But imagining you in Moretti's hands does." Clara's anger faltered. The room seemed to shrink around them. Adrian's fingers hovered beside her cheek. She could have stepped away. She did not. A warning siren split the silence. The lights changed from white to red. Adrian turned instantly, drawing Clara behind him as the steel door slammed shut. A voice crackled through the intercom. "Perimeter breach. East grounds." Adrian pressed a concealed button. "Status. 3 vehicles through the service gate." Internal access codes were used. Marcus had not betrayed them alone. Adrian looked at Clara. "We're leaving." The attack transformed the mansion into controlled chaos. Guards moved through corridors while shutters sealed the windows. Somewhere above, glass shattered. Clara ran beside Adrian through a hidden passage behind the surveillance room. He kept one hand at her lower back, directing her forward without slowing. "Where are we going?" "Tunnel to the lake." "Your house has an escape tunnel?" "My life requires several." An explosion shook dust from the ceiling. Clara stumbled. Adrian caught her around the waist, pulling her against him. For one suspended moment, she felt his heartbeat beneath her palm fast despite his calm expression. "Are you hurt?" "No." His hand remained at her waist a second longer than necessary. Then the ceiling groaned. He pulled her forward. They emerged in a boathouse concealed beneath the cliffs. Wind tore across the lake, carrying freezing rain through the open doors. A black speedboat waited at the dock. Before they reached it, gunfire struck the steel beam beside them. Adrian shoved Clara behind a concrete pillar and positioned himself in front of her. His men returned fire from the passage. Clara grabbed his coat. "You'll be hit. Stay behind me. You can't shield me from everything." His eyes met hers over his shoulder. "Watch me." Another burst struck the dock. Adrian moved with lethal control, directing his men while keeping his body between Clara and the attackers. A bullet tore through his upper arm. He barely reacted. Clara saw the blood first. "You're hurt." "It's nothing." "It is not nothing." The boat engine roared. Adrian lifted Clara over the low rail and climbed aboard behind her. The vessel shot into the black water while his men covered their escape. Clara pressed both hands over his wound. Blood soaked through her fingers. Adrian watched her face, rather than the injury. You're shaking. Someone shot you. I've been shot before. That does not make this acceptable. Lightning illuminated the lake. For the first time, Adrian smiled. It was brief and almost invisible, but it transformed him enough to reveal the boy she remembered. Clara still read. What? You used to scold me when I climbed through the basement window. You were bleeding then too. You gave me a towel and told me I was an idiot. You were an idiot. His gaze remained on her. You haven't changed. Clara pressed harder against the wound. You have. The smile disappeared. Yes. The safe house stood on a stormy stretch of shoreline 2 hours north of the city. It was smaller than the mansion, built of cedar and glass, surrounded by pines. There were no servants, only Adrian's physician and 4 guards. Clara remained beside him while the bullet wound was cleaned and stitched. Adrian refused pain medication. Of course you do, she muttered. He looked at her from the edge of the bed. You disapprove? I think men who refuse anesthesia should be charged extra. The physician hid a smile. Adrian's gaze warmed for half a second. When the doctor left, Clara noticed a dark bruise spreading across Adrian's ribs. You were hurt in the bakery too. It's old. How old? 3 days. She stared at him. You came to the bakery with broken ribs? Bruised. That is not better. Clara fetched a clean cloth from the bathroom, dampened it, and began wiping dried blood from his shoulder. Adrian sat motionless. The intimacy arrived quietly. No gunfire. No arguments. Only rain striking the windows and Clara's hand moving across his skin. He was covered in scars. Some were narrow and pale. Others were jagged, left by weapons, knives, and years she knew nothing about. Clara touched one beneath his shoulder. Adrian's muscles tightened. Did Moretti do this? Yes. She looked up. He raised you. He trained me. That wasn't what I said. Adrian watched her. He fed me when I was useful. Hurt me when I was not. Eventually, I became too valuable to kill. Clara's chest ached. You could have come home. To you? To the neighborhood. There was no home there for me. I would have helped. That was the problem. She frowned. Adrian's voice lowered. You would have tried to save me, and I would have let you. Would that have been so terrible? Yes. The answer was harsh, but the emotion beneath it was not. I needed to become someone no one could hurt, he continued. You would have reminded me that I was still capable of being hurt. Clara looked at the cloth in her hand. And now? Now it's too late. For what? To pretend you don't matter. Their eyes met. Adrian lifted his uninjured hand and touched a strand of hair near her cheek. His fingers barely brushed her skin. The contact was restrained, almost reverent. Clara's breath caught. He leaned closer. The storm darkened the windows behind him. She could feel the tension in his body, the dangerous self-control holding him still. Tell me to stop, he said. Clara should have. She remembered the photographs, the surveillance, the men bleeding because of his decisions. But she also remembered a starving boy trying to give half the bread back because he knew she was hungry. She whispered, I don't know what I want. Adrian's fingers moved to the edge of her jaw. I do. His mouth nearly touched hers. A phone rang on the table. Adrian froze. For 1 second, Clara saw raw fury in his eyes, not at her, but at the interruption. He withdrew and answered. The voice on the other end changed everything. Mrs. Alvarez had been taken. Moretti's men had intercepted the car, transporting her from the neighborhood's safe location. In exchange for her life, he demanded Clara appear at the Meridian Casino the following evening. Clara stood across the room, cold spreading through her. This happened because she lives near me. Adrian ended the call. This happened because Moretti is desperate. We have to get her back. We will. How? You won't be involved. Clara laughed once without humor. He asked for me, and he won't receive you. Mrs. Alvarez is 72. I know. She raised me after my mother died. I know. Stop saying you know as though knowing is enough. Adrian stood. Pain flashed across his face and vanished. You will stay here. No. His expression hardened. We're not debating this. You don't command me. I command everyone responsible for keeping you alive. I will not let someone die because you're afraid to risk me. His eyes became glacial. You are not a piece I place on a table. That is exactly how you're treating me. I'm treating you like the one thing I refuse to lose. The words silenced them both. Clara's heartbeat accelerated. Adrian seemed to regret revealing so much. His face closed again. She stepped toward him. "You don't love me." The word entered the room like a flame. His jaw tightened. No. It was a lie. She saw it. Perhaps he did too. "You love the girl who fed you," Clara said. "You love a memory. You have no idea who I am now. I know you hide collection notices inside a cookbook because you don't want your neighbors to worry. I know you work until your knees ache and pretend you're only tired. I know you eat the broken pastries because you save the perfect ones for customers. Because you watched me. I know you still leave food beneath the bridge every Thursday. I know you forgive people too quickly, except yourself. I know you think losing the building means you failed your mother." Clara's eyes filled. Adrian's voice softened. "And I know you're wrong." She stared at him. He stepped closer. "You think I remember one meal? I remember every choice you made afterward that proved it wasn't an accident." Clara's tears fell. Adrian's hand rose. But once again he stopped. She closed the distance herself. She pressed her forehead against his chest. For a moment, he did not move. Then his arms came around her. Not gently at first. Desperately. He held her as though 15 years of hunger had finally found a name. Clara felt his breath against her hair. "Let me help save her," she whispered. His hold tightened. "No." She leaned back. "Then you still don't know me." The following morning, Clara escaped the safe house. She did not make it far. A car waited at the end of the wooded drive. Marcus Reed sat behind the wheel. Clara stopped. His injured arm was bandaged, and one side of his face was bruised from Adrian's blow. "You shouldn't be here," she said. "Neither should you. You betrayed him." Marcus looked toward the trees. "I betrayed an empire. There's a difference. You gave Moretti my name, and I've regretted it since the bakery." Clara remained several feet away. "Why should I trust you?" "You shouldn't. But Mrs. Alvarez is being held beneath the Meridian Casino. Adrian intends to storm the building tonight." Clara's stomach tightened. "That will get her killed." "Yes. What do you want?" "To stop Moretti from starting a war that will destroy everyone." Marcus opened the passenger door. "I can get you inside through the hotel entrance." Clara stared at him. "You expect me to walk into a casino controlled by a man trying to use me?" "No. I expect you to walk into a meeting Adrian cannot enter without violence. And then, you give Moretti what he thinks he wants. Leverage." Marcus's eyes were tired. Adrian's empire. The Meridian Casino glittered above the river like a palace built from vice. Clara entered in a black evening dress Marcus had arranged, her dark hair pinned back, her fuller figure framed in elegant fabric she would never have chosen for herself. Guests turned as she crossed the marble lobby. Not because they recognized her, because armed men quietly followed her toward a private elevator. The top floor held a candlelit dining room overlooking Chicago. Leaders from 5 criminal families sat around a long table. At its head was Vincent Moretti. He was older than Clara expected, with silver hair, kind eyes, and the false warmth of a man who had survived by making cruelty look civilized. "Clara Bennett," he said. "The woman who taught Adrian Vale to feel indebted. Where is Mrs. Alvarez?" "Safe. I want to see her." Moretti gestured toward a side room. The door opened. Mrs. Alvarez sat inside, frightened but unharmed. A guard stood behind her. Clara's relief almost weakened her knees. "Release her," Moretti smiled. "You are in no position to negotiate." Clara looked around the table. "Then why are all these men waiting for me?" The smile faded slightly. Moretti gestured to the chair beside him. "Sit." Clara remained standing. "I'm told Adrian obeys no one," Moretti said. "Yet he altered shipping routes, abandoned alliances, and exposed hidden assets after one attack on your bakery. He protected innocent people. He destabilized a billion-dollar organization." "You mean he inconvenienced criminals?" Several men shifted. Moretti laughed softly. "You have courage. I'm tired. Of Adrian? Of men using fear as proof of strength." His eyes cooled. "Adrian was starving when I found him. Wild, angry, and desperate. I made him powerful. You made him afraid of compassion. I taught him survival. You taught him to become you." The dining room doors opened. Adrian entered alone. He wore a black suit, his injured arm concealed beneath the jacket. No bodyguards followed him, yet every man at the table went still. His gaze found Clara instantly. The emotion in his eyes was not relief. It was fury sharpened by fear. "What did you do?" he asked. Clara's pulse raced. Came for Mrs. Alvarez. I told you to stay at the house. And I told you I wouldn't let her die. Moretti leaned back, enjoying the fracture between them. Adrian crossed the room until he stood inches from Clara. You left protection. I made a choice. You trusted Marcus. I used the only way inside. His voice lowered. If you ever do this again. What? You'll lock me underground? His expression turned brutal. I'll burn every road leading away from me. The possessiveness should have frightened her. It did. But beneath it, she heard panic. Moretti Rose. Touching. Now that everyone has witnessed your weakness, we can discuss succession. Adrian turned toward him. There will be no succession. You abandoned the harbor agreement, threatened 3 families, and attacked my men over a bakery worker. Adrian's gaze became cold enough to freeze the room. You fired at her, and you responded like a wounded animal. No, Adrian said. A wounded animal acts without strategy. The windows behind Moretti suddenly filled with red lights. Across the river, warehouses erupted in controlled flames. Men around the table reached for phones. Adrian remained still. I transferred your accounts before entering, he continued. Your political allies have received copies of every recording you made in this casino. Federal agents are currently searching your river properties. Moretti's face changed. You would expose all of us. Only you. You built your empire beside mine. I built mine beneath yours, Adrian said, so I could remove it when the time came. Moretti looked at Clara. This is because of her. Adrian's expression revealed nothing. Yes. The answer echoed through the dining room. Clara stared at him. Moretti's civilized mask vanished. He grabbed Clara, pulled her against him, and pressed a blade to her throat. Adrian did not move. Everyone else did. Chairs scraped back. Weapons appeared. Moretti dragged Clara toward the windows. One step and she bleeds. Adrian's eyes locked onto Clara's. The room dissolved around that gaze. His voice was calm. Clara, look at me. She did. Do you trust me? She feared him. She trusted him. The contradiction became clear in that single breath. Yes. Close your eyes. Moretti tightened his hold. Clara closed them. The lights went out. A shot cracked through the darkness. Glass shattered. Clara felt Moretti's grip vanish. Then Adrian was there. His arms surrounded her before she hit the floor. He turned, shielding her, while the room erupted in chaos. Men shouted. Emergency lights flashed red. Moretti had fallen near the window. Wounded but alive, Adrian carried Clara toward the exit. She saw Mrs. Alvarez being escorted from the side room by Marcus, who had entered with Adrian's men through the service corridors. Moretti raised a weapon from the floor. Clara saw it before Adrian did. She twisted in his arms. The gun fired. Pain burned across her side. Adrian caught her as her body went limp. For the first time, the most feared man in America lost control. He dropped to his knees in the center of the casino, holding Clara against his chest. Blood spread across her black dress. No. His voice was unrecognizable. Moretti tried to rise. Adrian looked at him. Whatever Moretti saw in his face made him stop. Adrian handed Clara to Marcus with terrifying care. Keep pressure on the wound. Then he stood. The emergency lights painted him red. Moretti crawled backward. I made you. Adrian crossed the room. No, she did. The casino windows reflected the final collapse of Vincent Moretti's empire. Clara did not see what happened next. She only remembered Adrian returning to her, lifting her into his arms, and carrying her through a corridor filled with smoke and shattered glass. His white shirt was covered in her blood. Stay with me, he said. She tried to speak. You're commanding me again. His face broke. Yes. The elevator descended. Adrian pressed his forehead to hers. Then disobey me tomorrow. Clara's vision blurred. Ellie, I'm here. You came back. His arms tightened around her. I never left. Clara woke in a private hospital room, surrounded by white orchids and armed guards. Rain streaked the windows. Her side burned beneath the bandages. Adrian sat beside the bed wearing the same blood-stained shirt from the casino. His jacket was gone. His injured arm had bled through its bandage, but he seemed unaware of it. His hand held hers. Not possessively, desperately. He was asleep with his forehead resting against their joined hands. Clara watched him for several moments. The man who frightened cities looked younger in sleep. Exhausted, human. She moved her fingers. Adrian woke instantly. His eyes found hers, and relief struck his face so openly that Clara almost looked away. "You're awake. So are you." He stood, reaching for the medical call button. Clara tightened her grip. "Wait." He froze. "What happened to Moretti?" "He's gone." She understood the finality in his tone. "And Mrs. Alvarez?" "Safe." Furious, she threatened Marcus with a lamp. Clara smiled weakly. Adrian stared at the smile as though it were evidence of a miracle. "You were shot because of me," he said. "I moved because of you. That's not better. You would have died. I would prefer that." Clara's smile disappeared. "Don't say that. It's true. That doesn't make it acceptable." He looked toward the window. "I dismantled the Moretti organization. The remaining families are withdrawing from the harbor. Marcus is turning over financial records to federal prosecutors." Clara studied him. "What does that mean for you?" "It means my empire will not survive in its current form." "You're giving it up?" "I'm removing every operation that could bring another attack to your door. You spent 15 years building it. I spent 15 years believing power would make me safe." His gaze returned to her. "It did not." Clara's eyes filled. "You don't have to destroy everything because I was hurt. I'm not destroying it because you were hurt." He moved closer. "I'm destroying it because when I saw your blood, I realized I had built the exact world I once wanted to protect you from." His hand lifted to her cheek. This time, he touched her without stopping. His thumb moved gently across her skin. "I cannot ask you to love a man who watches from shadows, controls your choices, and calls fear protection." Clara's throat tightened. "What are you asking?" "Nothing." The word clearly hurt him. "I arranged ownership of your mother's building to be transferred to you. The bakery lease has been cleared. Every resident may return when security repairs are complete." Her expression changed. "You're trying to repay me again." "No." "Then what are you doing?" "Leaving you free." Adrian released her hand. Clara immediately felt the absence. "I'll remove every photograph, report, and surveillance file. You'll never see me unless you choose to." He turned toward the door. Panic rose in her chest. "You're leaving?" He stopped. "You asked me to let you leave. That was before you carried me through a casino while begging me not to die." His shoulders tightened. Clara pushed herself higher against the pillows despite the pain. "You don't get to decide for me now either." Adrian turned. She had never seen him uncertain. The vulnerability looked almost unnatural on him. "I don't know how to be near you without protecting you." "Then learn." "I don't know how to love without controlling the danger." "Then learn that too." His eyes searched hers. Clara's voice softened. "You were a starving boy who believed kindness created a debt. Then you became a powerful man who believed love created a weakness." He returned slowly to the bed. "You were wrong both times." Adrian stood beside her. "What does love create?" Clara looked at their hands. "A choice." She reached for him. "And I'm choosing to see who you become when you're no longer hiding across the street." His fingers closed around hers. For several seconds, neither spoke. Then Adrian bent and pressed his forehead to hers. His breath trembled. It was the smallest loss of control she had ever witnessed from him, and somehow the most intimate. "I love you," he said. No dramatic declaration. No command. Only truth. Clara closed her eyes. "Which version of me?" "All of them." His mouth hovered above hers. The 16-year-old girl who shared her dinner. The woman who carried her mother through illness. The baker who feeds strangers beneath bridges. The impossible woman who walks into casinos after I explicitly tell her not to. She smiled. "You're still angry about that?" "I will be angry about that until I die." "Adrian." His gaze softened. "And the woman who looked at everything I became and still demanded I become better." Clara touched his scar. "I love the boy you were." Pain flickered through his eyes. "And the man?" "I'm learning him." He waited. For once, he did not take. Clara pulled him closer. Their first kiss was gentle, but nothing about it felt uncertain. Adrian kissed her, like a man learning that devotion did not require possession. His hand remained against her cheek, his body carefully held away from her injury, every movement restrained by fear of causing pain. Clara felt years of silence inside him, years of watching, years of believing he could only love her from a distance. When they separated, his forehead remained against hers. "I'll still protect you," he whispered. "I know. I'll probably be unreasonable. You already are. I may place security outside the bakery. 1 guard. 6. 2. 4. 3. And they buy something. Adrian considered it. Agreed. 6 months later, Bennett Street looked alive again. The apartment building had been restored without losing its old red brick character. Mrs. Alvarez returned to the first floor and immediately began telling everyone that she had survived a kidnapping by insulting her captor's shoes. The bakery reopened with larger windows, warm lights, and a new sign. The last meal. Clara had protested the name until Adrian quietly admitted it was the only suggestion he cared about. On opening night, neighbors filled the shop. Children pressed their faces against the pastry display. Music drifted through the open doorway. 3 security guards sat in the back corner drinking coffee and buying more pastries than they could eat. Adrian remained outside. He stood across the street beneath the awning of the old laundromat, dressed in a dark coat, while snow began falling over Chicago. Clara watched him through the window. Even after months of dismantling criminal operations, testifying through attorneys, and converting his remaining companies into legitimate businesses, he still struggled to enter places that belonged to her ordinary life. He no longer watched without permission. But sometimes the old habit returned. Clara removed her apron and crossed the street. Adrian's gaze moved over her immediately, checking for danger before settling on her face. "You're missing the opening. I attended from here. That is not attending. You have many guests. They're waiting to meet you. They know who I am. They know who you were." His expression tightened slightly. Clara stepped beneath the awning. Snow collected in his dark hair. "You can walk into a casino filled with enemies," she said. "But you're afraid of Mrs. Alvarez and a room full of bakery customers. Mrs. Alvarez threatened to arrange our wedding herself. She likes efficiency. She asked Marcus whether I own a church." Clara laughed. Adrian looked at her the way he always did when she laughed, as though joy was something sacred he had once believed he would never deserve. She held out her hand. "Come inside." He looked at it. 15 years earlier, she had offered him bread. Now she offered him a place beside her. Adrian took her hand. Together, they crossed the street. The bakery quieted when he entered. Old instincts moved through the room. People recognized the face from newspapers. Conversations stopped. A child dropped a spoon. Adrian's grip tightened around Clara's hand. She looked up at him. For once, the silence did not belong to fear. Mrs. Alvarez marched forward with a plate. "You are late," she announced. Adrian, who had once made governors wait outside his office, inclined his head. "My apologies." She pushed the plate toward him. Tomato soup. 2 slices of bread. A single apple. Adrian went still. Clara's eyes filled. Mrs. Alvarez looked between them. She told me the story. The bakery remained silent as Adrian accepted the meal. He looked at Clara. 15 years disappeared. For a moment, they were 2 hungry children in a cold basement, sharing the only food either of them had. Then Adrian placed the plate on a nearby table. He reached inside his coat. Clara's heartbeat accelerated when he lowered himself to one knee. The room erupted in gasps. She covered her mouth. Adrian held no enormous diamond, no jeweled symbol of the fortune he had once controlled. Instead, he held a simple brass key, the restored key to her mother's building. He had engraved 2 words into it. "Come home." Clara looked down at him. The most feared man in America is proposing with a house key? His expression remained solemn. "I considered a ring." "And? You dislike unnecessary extravagance." "I do. I purchased one anyway." Laughter moved through the room as he produced a ring from his other pocket. Clara's tears spilled over. Adrian looked only at her. "I spent half my life mistaking power for safety," he said. "You taught me that safety was a person willing to sit beside me when I had nothing." The bakery became completely still. "I cannot promise that I will never be afraid of losing you. I cannot promise that every part of me will become gentle. But I can promise that I will never again make choices for you and call them love." His voice roughened. "I will stand beside you. I will protect what we build together. And every day, I will choose you without turning that choice into a cage." Clara knelt in front of him. She cupped his face, ignoring the startled murmurs around them. "You forgot one thing." Concern entered his eyes. "What?" "You don't owe me a life." "I know." "You don't owe me an empire." "I know." "You don't owe me anything." Adrian looked at her as snow drifted beyond the windows. "I know." Clara smiled through her tears. "Then ask me because you want me." His composure broke into the rare smile she had once seen on a storm-dark boat. "Clara Bennett, I want every ordinary morning you'll give me. Every argument, every burned loaf, every impossible act of compassion. I want the life I was too frightened to imagine. He opened the ring box. Marry me. Clara kissed him before answering. The bakery erupted in cheers. Mrs. Alvarez loudly declared that the answer counted as yes. Adrian stood and lifted Clara carefully into his arms. She laughed against his mouth while the neighborhood crowded around them. Outside, black SUVs remained parked beneath the falling snow, but their engines were off. No soldiers stepped out. No enemies waited in the shadows. For the first time in 15 years, Adrian Vale was not watching Clara's life from across the street. He was inside it. Months later, on a cold winter evening, Clara found him alone in the apartment building's basement. The laundry room had been restored, but one section of the old brick wall remained untouched. Adrian stood before it holding the faded blue scarf she had given him as a boy. Clara approached quietly. You disappeared from dinner. I needed a moment. She slipped her hand into his. What are you thinking about? The first night you found me. You tried to steal canned peaches. I was unsuccessful. You knocked over an entire shelf. The shelf was unstable. You were clumsy. I was starving. Clara rested her head against his shoulder. You're not anymore. Adrian looked down at her. No. Above them, footsteps crossed the floorboards. Laughter echoed from Mrs. Alvarez's apartment. The building breathed with warmth and life. Adrian placed the scarf inside a small wooden box built into the wall. Then he closed it. Clara watched him. You're finally putting it away? I don't need it to remember anymore. He turned toward her. You're here. Clara touched his face. And so are you. He kissed her slowly in the room where their lives had first collided. No guards. No gunfire. No hidden cameras. Only the quiet hum of the restored furnace. And the city moving beyond the basement walls. Adrian had once believed the meal Clara shared had saved him because it kept his body alive for one more night. He understood the truth now. It had saved the part of him that could still recognize love when it finally returned. And Clara finally understood that the lonely boy she had helped had not come back to repay a debt. He had come back because, beneath the violence, the money, and the empire, he had spent 15 years searching for the only place that had ever felt like home. This time, neither of them watched from the shadows. This time, they stayed, together,